Hi everyone, this is Yana Smakula sharing a new video tutorial for Alt New. In this video, I will be working with a painted poppy stamp set. In the comments to my previous Alt New video, somebody asked for this stamp set to be used in my next video, and since I had it on hand, I decided to give it a go. When we think of poppies, color red instantly comes to mind, and it came to my mind too. I actually even shared a card using the same stamp set and red and black color combo. I'll link to it in the video description. However, after spending a couple of minutes in Pinterest, I discovered that there are many colors to this beautiful flower. Maybe those aren't entirely poppies, but I've seen some white, purple, gray, and even blue poppies out there. That got me thinking that I should be able to use just about any color to stamp these onto my card. Today I will be making a simple one-layer project with lots of stamping and a bit of heat embossing. I'm hoping this video will inspire you to break out your painted poppy set from Alt New and try to use a variety of colors for your stamping. So here is the stamp set itself. Never mind the backing sheet, what I have here is a prototype, but when you buy this in the store, it's going to be packaged just like any other stamp set. So today I will be using the outline of the poppy as well as the two solid images to stamp my flower. I will also be using the little poppy bod to fill in any smaller areas on my stamped panel and also the leaf. For my sentiment, I decided to use a different set with lots of different thank you messages, and I've already mounted those onto a clear block. You can see that I've combined a large handwritten thanks with a few printed sentiments. I always find the combination of handwritten and printed fonts a great option. For the inks, I have selected a couple of colors from Hero Arts. These are new colors for me, and therefore the color combo is also going to be new for me. Now, these are dye inks, but you can use whatever inks you prefer. Pigment inks, however, will not work for the stamping technique that I will be sharing today. So for my colors, I have mint, peach, and warm gray. I also have gold embossing powder and clear embossing ink. I'm going to start working on my card by stamping the sentiment first. It's important to have it stamped first as it's going to work as a guide for the rest of our stamping. The stamped sentiment is going to tell us where to stamp and where not to stamp our flowers. I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black ink, inking my stamp cluster, and notice that I already have a couple of stamps on my clear block. All of these have been aligned and I have already done a test stamping to see if they stamp straight. So I'm going to ink up my stamp, make sure my panel is aligned on my cutting mat, and try to stamp the sentiment in the center of my panel. The cardstock that I'm using is Neenah Solar White, but any white cardstock will work for this. You do not need anything special. As soon as my sentiment is stamped onto my card, I can begin working on my flowers. Remember, the sentiment is working as a guide, and it's telling us where we need to position our florals on our card. Now I'm only going to use one color of ink for each of the flowers, and I will show you how to get a slightly darker color using just one ink pad for that layered look. It's actually a very basic technique. I'm going to be stamping my flowers in groups of 3 following the rule of visual triangle. So I'm keeping the number of flowers to an odd one, so 3 or 5 or 7 or 9, and I'm stamping them in 3 colors and 3 areas around my sentiment. Some of these are going to be fully stamped flowers, and some are going to be partially stamped flowers. Now these impressions do look uneven at first. This is due to the kind of ink that I'm using. They will even out in a couple of minutes after the ink had a bit of time to travel and absorb into the paper. You could, if you wanted, stamp these same images once again on top of the previously stamped ones for a more even look and a bit brighter color, but if you're using just one color of ink like I'm doing here, don't do that. We will be doing that using the smaller layering stamp to achieve that gradation of color. So now you can see I've stamped the first poppy using mint color in 3 spots around my sentiment. I try to stay away from the sentiment just a bit as I know I will be adding gold embossing later and it will require a little bit more room there on the card. Now comes the fun part. Like I said, I'm only using one color of ink for each flower. But the flower has 2 parts or 2 layers, well actually 3, but the third one is going to be embossed in gold. So in order to make my flower appealing to the eye, I need to stamp that second layer. I don't have any ink in my stash that is one shade darker or one shade lighter the ink that I used, but I do know a simple trick. By using the same ink and stamping my second layer on top of the first one, my second layer will become one shade darker. You can distinctively see it after I've stamped it. It's going to become less visible after some time, but it's still going to give my flower that nice depth and illusion of dimension. Pretty cool, right? This idea was actually inspired by another video on the Alt New channel where Tasneem used one ink pad for a second, third, and even fourth generation stamping technique to stamp the vintage roses. For this card, I simply reversed that, and instead of doing a second generation stamping technique and losing color, I layered color and got a slightly darker look. Just like so, I kept on working on my poppies and stamped 3 more flowers, forming another visual triangle around the sentiment. This time I used a beautiful peach color. I also overlapped some of the flowers for a continuous look. I will be doing more overlapping as I'm stamping the last 3 flowers using the warm gray. I also added the second layer of ink using the second part of my poppy stamp and created the slightly darker center for each flower. At this point, you can see that the stamped impressions became smooth and even, and that second layer of ink blended nicely into the first one. So I followed the same principle and stamped the last trio of flowers using warm gray. I did 1 additional flower at the bottom there, at the left corner, as I felt I had too much white space. After I was done stamping the main flower, I grabbed the smaller one, or the poppy bud actually, and stamped it using mint ink in 3 areas on my card, filling any white space that I had left. I also used the same color of ink to stamp the leaf. At this point, my background was almost complete. You will probably think that it doesn't look all that pretty, and I agree with you. We only have awkwardly shaped colored areas on our panel, but as soon as we add the poppy outlines, it's going to magically transform and will be very beautiful. Well, maybe not magically, but it's sure going to be very pretty. Now, before we do any embossing, and this step is actually very, very important, we need to make sure that our background is completely dry. We need our ink to be 100% dry. If it's not, it's going to ruin the whole thing. Now you can set this aside and come back to it in about an hour, and that will actually depend on the kind of ink that you used. If you used pigment ink, you will have to wait a lot more than just 1 hour. Or you can use your heat tool and lightly heat the entire panel. It's going to warp a bit, but never fear, we will fix that later. The key to have less warping is to move your heat tool around and never keep it in one spot for too long. So after you either waited or have dried your panel, you can do a simple test by sprinkling embossing powder on top of it. If it sticks to the panel, that means that the ink is still wet and you need to dry it some more. If it doesn't stick, you're good to go. Now before I go ahead and emboss anything, I'm going to prep my paper using an anti-static powder pouch. This is going to help me keep my embossing nice and clean. I'm going to work in sections here, so I'm only adding powder to one section, not to the entire card front. Now I'm going to grab my poppy outline stamp and try to match the outline with the already stamped solid center. It's not going to be perfect, but I personally think that that's the beauty of it. I actually like when the outline and the solid parts don't match up. I like when one is offset just a little bit, but this is just my personal preference. You might like to have your images stamped differently. It's completely up to you. Now I'm going to try to emboss those areas that overlap all at once. I don't want to heat set something, then have to come back and heat set another outline right next to it and reheat and remelt the powder next to it. As soon as that gold embossing powder melts on your cardstock, you are going to have a stunning, truly stunning background done using a simple poppy stamp. And I don't know about you, but it doesn't look like a poppy flower to me anymore. It kind of looks like some unknown fancy flower to me. And that touch of gold is just beautiful. Now, I said that I will tell you how to fix that warping from heat embossing. I have one very, very simple trick that I always use, and the trick is to back that piece of cardstock up with another piece of cardstock. In this case, because I'm making a 1-layer card, I'm going to back this piece up with a card base. So basically, I'm just going to adhere my stamped and heat embossed panel onto an A2 top folding card. I also decided to add some white floss to my card. I simply wrapped it around a couple of times and tied it into a bow. So here's one final look at my card using the Painted Poppies stamp set from Alt New. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below or in the blog post. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!